All right, happy lunch hour. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm Alex Nordquist. I'm the Forestry Division Manager here under Parks and Rec. And we're going to talk about trees today, which is always a fun thing. We're going to talk about plans, which isn't always exciting, but we're here to make it exciting. We're talking about our kind of master plan document for forestry, which we call our Urban Forest Management Plan. And that's a big, large-scale kind of overarching document that we use to do all of our work, but also how we impact the community. So it's not just the nuts and bolts work of our budget and our planting goals and our maintenance goals and our removal goals. It's really about kind of the community outreach that we do. We often pull up to folks' homes to work on the trees in front, their street trees, their boulevard trees, and we're also working in your park spaces. So as folks trickle in, we'll kind of dive in and get started here, but I think just a little more background. Our current plan is approaching 10 years old. We've done a lot of that work, so we feel like we've accomplished those goals. We're kind of feeling some of the strain of maybe this is outdated, maybe this needs to be more current, maybe we need a fresh look. So that's a lot of the push that's behind this planning effort. And a big part of that is to engage the community and reach out to other city departments and divisions and really bring an outside perspective when we're doing this type of planning effort. So we have a consulting team to give us that outside perspective. They're on the screen right now, and they're going to be doing a brief presentation for us. And then, like I said, the public interaction, the public feedback is really what we're looking for. And so about half the time for today's lunch hour session here is to just talk with folks in the room. And a little bit of hot seat here, this row here, troublemakers here. This is our part of our forestry team. And, you know, the team effort is what I'm talking about. And we have these conversations daily where it's not just me telling folks what to do. We're building a relationship, we're building a conversation, and that team aspect is really what I think we all enjoy, and that makes our operation a lot more effective. So these are the folks here that are in front of your houses doing that tree work, and you probably interacted with them all before, and they probably know your trees better than I do. So it's great to have the team here, and you can feel free to corner them for some Q&A when the presentation's done, not just myself. I'll hide behind them. So without further ado here, I think we'll kick it off to the virtual presentation team. Josh, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, so Alex, you just introduced yourself, and I'm not sure who all is in the room. Is Mitch there with you?
Yeah, we do have Mitch here.
All right, maybe we can have Mitch introduce himself real quick.
And we have Mila.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Mitch Overton. I'm the director of the Bozeman Parks and Recreation Department. The Forestry Division is a division within the Parks and Rec Department. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you all for even coming out today to be engaged here. This is our second public meeting. First one we did at noon online, and we're doing this one in person, and we'll have two more following this meeting. And then really, I think Alex kind of touched on this, but these are 10-year plans that we use to inform our budget and our operations and our long-term planning and make sure we're following best practices. So thanks again for being here, and I'll turn it over to Mila.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mila Kelly. I'm part of the team that's working on this. These are your resident experts. I'm a longtime Bozeman resident and work just down the road and have lived here for about 26 years or so. And I'm just supporting the team.
All right. Thank you both. And I'm Josh Elliott. I'm the project manager for the consultant team, and I work for DJ&A in Missoula. And so our team consists of several folks from DJ&A who are helping out. And then we've also brought in a team from Planet Geo who are urban forestry experts and have done this work a lot. So collectively, I think we bring a strong team to help the city out with this project. But my role is just to kind of coordinate all the pieces. Um, and I will turn it over to Hannah to introduce herself.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. My name's Hannah Coombs. I'm with DJNA as well. I'm an environmental scientist with the company, and I'm also a certified arborist. And my role on this project is to help specifically with the planning effort and updating the plan and kind of serving as that bridge between how the plan develops and how we can synthesize all the great technical information that we're getting from Alex and his team and from the Planet Geo team. I'll hand it over to Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Hey, I'm Matt Urmson, Urban Forestry Planner with Planet Geo. I'm ISA certified arborist, wildfire mitigation specialist, tree risk and disease management specialist. And I will primarily be making recommendations, reviewing and analyzing all the data, and figuring out next steps for Bozeman.
All right, thanks, Matt. And just to reiterate the what the purpose of this meeting is here today. So we're going to present the outline that we've come up with, and there's 8 key sections listed on this slide. I'm not going to read them all right now, but the bulk of this presentation is going to be Hannah and Matt presenting more details about each of these areas and what we plan to include in the Urban Forest Management Plan update. And the hope is that once you all kind of understand what the plan is and the different things we include or thinking about including, that you can chime in with what's important to you, and we can learn. Maybe we're already planning to include that, or if we're not, then we can add that to our approach. So anyway, that's the overall purpose for this meeting. And before I hand it over to Hannah and Matt, I just kind of want to go over the project schedule and the different phases that we're thinking about our work in. So phase 1 was just to help us understand like what are we doing and how we're going to do it. And a big part of that was drafting a community engagement plan. So a plan to figure out how we can best involve community members in this process. And so that part's done. We're now firmly in the middle of phase 2. And that is really